My name is Leo. I'm an architectural designer, which is a formal way of saying I spend my days trying to coax light and air and a sense of belonging into spaces made of wood and glass. I live just outside of Portland, Oregon, in a small house I designed myself, nestled among Douglas firs that stand like silent, patient sentinels. The air here smells of damp earth and cedar, and most days, a fine mist hangs in the trees, blurring the edges of the world. It's a quiet life, one I've carefully built to be a sanctuary from the noise. For most of my 42 years, the loudest noise has been my own family. I am the older brother, the steady one, the one who remembers birthdays and insurance premiums with equal, quiet diligence. My younger brother, Daniel, is the one who remembers to be charming. Our parents, lovely people who tried their best, fell into the easy rhythm of this dynamic. Daniel was the son, bright and celebrated, his every success a victory for the family, his failures softened and excused. I was the foundation, unseen but essential, holding things up. I paid the shortfall on my parents' mortgage one year when my father's consulting work dried up. I covered the cost of my mother's emergency dental surgery, wiring the money directly to the clinic so she wouldn't have to feel the embarrassment of asking. When Daniel's third, or was it the fourth, entrepreneurial venture collapsed, leaving him with a mountain of debt and a shattered credit score, I was the one who co-signed the lease on his Subaru so he could still get around. I never kept a tally. It wasn't a transaction. It was just what you did. It was my role. So when Daniel and his wife, Chloe, announced they were expecting their first child, my first feeling was a pure, uncomplicated wave of joy. Here was a chance to give something not out of necessity, but out of sheer happiness. I wanted to do something meaningful, something that spoke of permanence and care. This wasn't about the money, it was about the intention. It was a chance to finally participate in a family joy, not just manage a family crisis. I spent weeks on it. As a designer, I have a deep appreciation for craftsmanship, for things made with hands and heart. I commissioned a crib from a woodworker in the Willamette Valley, a man who uses reclaimed old-growth cedar and joins the wood with such precision it looks as if it grew that way. There was a 4-month wait list, but I knew Daniel and Chloe wouldn't be looking for a crib that early. I found an elderly woman on one of the San Juan Islands who made the most exquisite hand-stitched quilts, each one a soft mosaic of stories. I drove up and took the ferry just to pick it out myself, a beautiful pattern of hummingbirds and foxgloves. I ordered a top-of-the-line stroller, one I knew they'd seen online but would never dream of affording. I arranged for a year's subscription to an organic baby food delivery service, a newborn photography session with a well-regarded local artist, and a set of sterling silver utensils engraved with the baby's future initials. The centerpiece, for me, was a custom-built bookshelf I designed myself, low and sturdy, filled with cloth-bound editions of every classic children's book I could remember loving. The total came to just over $12,000. I didn't tell a soul. The gifts were scheduled to arrive the week of the baby shower. I wasn't trying to make a statement or upstage anyone. I saw it as a quiet, foundational gift, a way of building a small, beautiful library of comfort and security for this new life. For once, I thought I could contribute something that was purely about love, not logistics. 3 days before the shower, my phone chimed with a text from Chloe. I was sketching at my drafting table, the rain pattering a soft, familiar rhythm on the skylight above. Her message read, "Hey Leo. So excited for Saturday. Just a little heads up, we're trying to keep the shower really intimate, more of a close friends and immediate family thing. We want to keep it low-key. Hope you understand. Can't wait to see you soon." I stared at the words, the friendly exclamation points feeling like tiny, polite daggers. Immediate family. I was his brother. I read it again, and then a third time, trying to find a different interpretation. Was this her clumsy way of saying not to bring a date? Or was it exactly what it sounded like, an uninvitation? My hands felt cold. I took a screenshot and sent it to my mom, my thumb hovering over the send button for a long moment. I didn't add any commentary. I didn't need to. Her reply came back in under a minute. "Oh honey, don't be so sensitive. You know how Chloe can be with her planning. Don't make a big deal out of it. Just send a gift, they'll be thrilled. Just send a gift." The words landed with a quiet, heavy thud in the center of my chest. It wasn't Chloe's text that broke something in me. It was my mother's. The casual dismissal of my feelings, the immediate instruction to reduce my role to a financial transaction. Don't make it awkward. Don't be dramatic. Just be useful. All the unsaid rules of our family, laid bare in a single, cheerful text. No one asked me if I'd already bought something. No one considered that I might want to be there, to see their faces, to share in the moment. My presence was secondary to my function. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my living room, the lights off, watching the rain trace silver paths down the large window that overlooked the forest. The quiet of my house felt different, not peaceful, but empty. I thought about all the years of quiet support, the checks written, the problems solved, the emotional burdens I'd carried without complaint. I had mistaken my utility for love. Sometime around 4 in the morning, a sense of calm clarity washed over me. It wasn't anger. It was an awakening. I had been participating in a system that was quietly draining the life out of me, and I had been doing it willingly. It was time to stop. I opened my laptop. The first thing I did was call the woodworker and the quilt maker. I explained that my circumstances had changed, and I canceled the orders. I felt a pang of sadness, but it was overshadowed by a strange sense of relief. Then I logged into the online portal for the family's shared investment account, an account I had set up and largely funded years ago to help my parents with their retirement. My name was the primary on the account. With a few clicks, I initiated a transfer of my portion into my personal savings. It was a significant sum, the safety net I had built for them. Now it would be my own. Finally, I navigated to the website of the auto leasing company. I found the account for the Subaru Outback Daniel was driving. My name was the primary lessee, his was just an authorized driver. I read the terms of the agreement I had signed. I had the right to suspend the account or terminate the lease. I clicked the button to put a temporary freeze on the account, effective immediately. The car wasn't repossessed, but the insurance would be invalidated and any further payments would be blocked. He would get a notification. As the sun began to filter through the trees, a weak, watery light, my phone started to buzz. And it didn't stop. It vibrated on the kitchen counter like a trapped insect. I watched the screen light up again and again. My mother. Daniel. My father. My mother again. By sunrise, there were 55 missed calls and a cascade of frantic texts. "Leo, what's going on? Call me immediately. Did you take money from the account? The bank just sent an alert. Leo, the leasing company called. What did you do? I need my car." I didn't answer. I made coffee, the aroma filling the quiet house. I sat at my table and drank it slowly, watching the birds flit between the wet branches of the firs. For the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt like sovereignty. Around 8 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Not a polite single chime, but a hard, insistent press. I walked to the door, my coffee mug warm in my hands, and opened it. There they were, all 4 of them, huddled together on my small porch as if for protection against the morning mist. My mother, her face tight with a mixture of fury and confusion. My father, looking lost and uncomfortable, his gaze fixed somewhere over my shoulder. And Daniel and Chloe, standing slightly behind them, their expressions a perfect blend of indignation and disbelief. Chloe was holding her coat closed over her stomach, a gesture that felt both protective and accusatory. They looked shocked when I opened the door. Shocked that I wasn't hiding, that I wasn't distraught. I didn't invite them in. I just stood in the doorway, the cool morning air washing over me. My mother found her voice first. Leo, what on earth do you think you're doing? I took a sip of my coffee before I answered, the simple act feeling like a small rebellion. I'm changing the terms, I said, my voice even and calm. Daniel pushed forward. Changing the terms? You froze my car. You emptied the investment account. What is wrong with you? I looked at him, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time without the softening filter of brotherly obligation. I saw not a man under pressure, but a boy who had never been asked to grow up. I spent $12,000 on gifts for your baby, Daniel, I said. My voice was quiet, not meant to carry beyond the porch. Not for show, not to impress anyone, and definitely not to compete. I did it because, for once, I thought I could do something that was about joy. Something that didn't feel like fixing a problem or paying a bill. I paused, letting the words hang in the damp air. I commissioned a cedar crib from a man who takes half a year to make one. I drove to the islands to buy a quilt. I wanted to give your child a foundation of beautiful things made with love. And your response, your family's response, was to tell me to stay home and mail a check. Chloe scoffed, a short, sharp sound of disbelief. Oh, please. You're just being dramatic because your feelings got hurt. You always have to be the martyr. That was it. The word that crystallized everything. Martyr. The one who suffers for the sake of others, quietly, nobly. It was the role they had written for me, and they were angry that I had decided to walk off the stage. You're right, I said, and their expressions flickered with surprise. My feelings were hurt. But that's not why I did this. I did this because that text and my mother's response made me realize something. You don't see me as family. You see me as a resource. An emergency fund. A cosigner. A quiet, reliable utility that you've taken for granted. I looked from my mother's stunned face to my father's pained one. The car lease needs to be transferred into your name, Daniel. The investment account is closed. From now on, you are all on your own. I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't need one. I stepped back, closed the door gently, and locked it. The doorbell began ringing again, a frantic, furious buzzing, but the sound was muffled now, distant. It was the sound of a world I no longer lived in. I walked back to my kitchen, rinsed my coffee mug, and placed it in the rack to dry. The house was quiet again. And in that quiet, I could finally hear myself think. They stood on my porch for another 10 minutes. I could hear their muffled voices through the thick wood of the door, my mother's, sharp and indignant, Daniel's, rising in panicked frustration. My father remained silent. I pictured him standing there, his hands in his pockets, wishing he could simply evaporate. He'd always hated confrontation, a trait that had long enabled the rest of the family's casual cruelties. His passivity was a form of consent. When they finally left, the silence they left behind was profound. It felt clean. I didn't feel triumphant or even angry anymore. I just felt a deep, hollow sense of sorrow for the family I had always imagined we were, the one that had never really existed outside of my own hopeful heart. I called my cousin, Ben. He's on my father's side, a landscape architect who lives down in Ashland. We weren't close, not in the day-to-day sense, but we shared a similar temperament. We were the observers in a family of performers. He answered on the second ring. Leo, I was wondering when you'd call. You heard. A dry chuckle came down the line. My mom called your mom. The family telegraph is running hot. According to the official report, you've had some kind of catastrophic mental breakdown and have stolen the family fortune. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It was $12,000 on baby gifts, Ben. And then they uninvited me to the shower. There was a long pause. When he spoke again, his voice was serious. Of course, they did. Leo, you've been the family's silent partner for 20 years. You fix things. You pay for things. You absorb the stress. But you do it quietly. By planning this grand gesture, this beautiful, thoughtful mountain of gifts, you broke the rules. You weren't just being useful. You were being visible. and your visibility highlighted their inadequacy. I wasn't trying to. I know you weren't, he cut in gently. That's what makes it so much worse for them. Your genuine kindness feels like a judgment. Daniel gets to be the golden boy because he never holds up a mirror to anyone. He takes and smiles, and that's easy for them to love. You give, and your giving reminds them of everything they're not doing. You've always been the family conscience, and nobody likes to be reminded they have one. He was right. I hadn't just offered a gift. I had offered a standard of care they weren't prepared to meet or even acknowledge. My love was an inconvenience. They were just here, I told him. All four of them. On my porch. Let me guess, Ben said. Your mom was furious. Daniel was a victim. Chloe was indignant. And your dad looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on earth. You should write a play, I said, a small, sad smile touching my lips. It's been the same play for 30 years, Leo. I've just had a front row seat. They did the same thing to my dad when he finally stopped lending your grandfather money. They don't just get mad. They erase you. The word hung in the air. Erase. It was so much more final than just being angry. It was a complete invalidation of your existence. We talked for another hour. For the first time, I told him everything, the mortgage, the dental surgery, the endless string of small financial rescues for Daniel. He listened without interruption, his silence a comforting presence. When I finished, he said, You didn't just stand up for yourself today, Leo. You resigned from a job you never even applied for. After we hung up, I walked through my house. The light was soft, the wood floors warm beneath my feet. I had designed this place to be a refuge, and now, finally, it was. The storm was outside. Inside, there was only a quiet, spreading calm. The next few days were a study in passive aggression. Chloe posted a gallery of photos from the baby shower. The pictures were bright and happy, full of pastel colors and smiling faces. The caption was a masterpiece of pointed sweetness, feeling so incredibly blessed today. Surrounded by our true family and closest friends who know that the only gift that matters is love. We are so lucky to have a circle that is all about support, not show. Our little one is already so loved. The comment section was a chorus of agreement from aunts and distant cousins. So true. Family is everything. You don't need fancy things when you have each other. Love is the greatest gift of all. It was a public trial, and I was being convicted of being transactional and unloving by the very people who had demanded I behave that way. They were spinning a narrative where I was the cold, wealthy brother who tried to buy his way into a celebration he was excluded from, and they were the humble, loving family who valued connection over cash. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. I showed the post to Ben during one of our now daily calls. He sighed. They're trying to control the story because they've lost control of you. Your silence is driving them insane. If you would just yell, or argue, or defend yourself, they'd know what to do. But you're not playing. You're just gone. And that terrifies them. Daniel waited a week to contact me directly. A text message appeared on my phone one afternoon. I need to get my things from the Subaru before they tow it. The freeze on the account means the insurance is void. I can't even legally drive it. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the situation. Just logistics. He needed something from me. I typed back a simple reply. The car is at the dealership. They are holding your personal items for you. The lease is officially terminated. You'll have to find another car. His response was instantaneous. Are you serious? How am I supposed to get to my meetings? How is Chloe supposed to get to her appointments? Do you have any idea the mess you've made? I had made the mess. Not the man who couldn't secure his own car loan. Not the man whose wife was texting his brother to keep him away from a family party. I was the messmaker. I typed slowly, deliberately. That sounds like a problem you will have to solve, Daniel. I blocked his number. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. It was like turning off a dripping faucet. The constant, low-level demand for my attention, my resources, my energy, it was gone. A few days later, a formal-looking envelope arrived in the mail. It was from a law firm. My heart hammered in my chest. Were they suing me? I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a letter from an estate lawyer informing me that my parents had initiated the process of dissolving the shared investment account and were requesting a full accounting of all transactions over the past 5 years. They weren't suing me for the money I'd taken. They couldn't. It was legally mine. They were auditing me. They were looking for a mistake, a misstep, a technicality they could use to prove I had been dishonest. They were trying to find a way to make their story true. I should have been angry. Instead, I felt a wave of profound sadness. They would rather pay a lawyer to hunt for my flaws than pick up the phone and ask me how I was feeling. That evening, I sat at my desk and began to compile the records. I had kept meticulous notes for years, not because I ever expected this, but because it's my nature. I gathered bank statements, receipts, emails, text messages, the mortgage payment, the dental bill, the 3 separate times I'd paid off Daniel's high-interest credit cards, the time I'd covered his rent for 4 months after he was let go from a tech startup. I organized it all into a single, comprehensive spreadsheet with dates, amounts, and brief, factual descriptions. I attached scanned copies of every relevant document. The final tally at the bottom was staggering. It was far more than I had ever allowed myself to consciously acknowledge. It wasn't a gift. It was a subsidy. I had been subsidizing my brother's life and my parents' peace of mind for more than a decade. I attached the file to an email addressed to my parents and their lawyer. I didn't write a long, emotional letter. I didn't defend myself. I just wrote one line in the body of the email. Here is the accounting you requested. I hit send. And then, I got up, walked to my front door, and went for a long walk in the rain. The cool drops on my face felt like a baptism. I was washing it all away. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I would not be going back. The foundation was gone, and they were finally feeling the tremor. Let them. A house built on a person's silence deserves to fall. The response to my email was a week of profound, deafening silence. The lawyer didn't reply. My parents didn't call. Daniel was a ghost. It was the kind of quiet that follows a landslide, where the landscape is so irrevocably altered that no one knows what to say. The facts, laid out in the stark, emotionless columns of a spreadsheet, had been more devastating than any argument. Numbers don't have a side. They just are. Ben called me on Saturday morning. Any news from the front? He asked, his tone light. Not a word, I said. I think I may have actually shocked them into speechlessness. You didn't shock them, Leo. You presented them with a bill for the fantasy they've been living in. Nobody wants to see that receipt. He paused. So, what's your next move? There is no next move, I said, and the truth of it surprised me. I'm done moving. I'm just here. That afternoon, I found myself drawn to my workshop. I hadn't worked on a personal project in months, too consumed with my job and the low-grade hum of family obligations. I pulled out a beautiful piece of reclaimed walnut I'd been saving and began to sketch. I wasn't sure what it would be yet, a chair, a small table, maybe just a simple box. It didn't matter. The feel of the pencil in my hand, the scent of the wood, the quiet focus of creation, it felt like coming home to myself. I was building something for no one but me. The piece was shattered 2 days later by a call from my father. It was the first time he'd called me alone since this all began. His voice was strained, heavy with a weariness that seemed to go bone deep. Leo, he started, forgoing any pleasantries. Your mother and we saw the email. The spreadsheet. I waited, saying nothing. I didn't know, he said, and his voice was so quiet I could barely hear it. I mean, I knew you helped out. I never saw it all added up like that. All in one place. It was the closest thing to an admission I had ever heard from him. Not an apology, but a crack in the wall of denial. It wasn't your job to see it, Dad, I said, my own voice gentle. It was my job to stop doing it. This has to stop, he said, a note of desperation creeping in. Lawyers, spreadsheets. This isn't us. This isn't how a family should be. I agree, I said. A family shouldn't need one of its members to bankrupt himself emotionally to keep the peace. There was a long, static-filled silence on the line. I could hear his shallow breathing. He was a man adrift, caught between a wife he couldn't defy, a son he couldn't bring himself to hold accountable, and another son he was finally, belatedly, seeing clearly. "What do you want, Leo?" he finally asked, the question laced with exhaustion. "What will it take to fix this?" The question hung in the air. For years, my answer would have been simple. Nothing. It's fine. Don't worry about it. I would have absorbed the pain, smoothed things over, and put the family back together, no matter the cost to myself. But I was no longer that man. "There's nothing to fix, Dad," I said softly. "This is just what it looks like when the roles change. It's uncomfortable. But it's not broken. It's just new." I don't think he understood. But for the first time, I didn't feel the compulsive need to make him. I said my goodbyes and hung up, my hands steady. Life began to settle into a new rhythm. The days were quiet, punctuated by work, long walks in the forest, and the slow, satisfying progress on the walnut piece in my workshop, which was beginning to look like a small, elegant writing desk. The nights were mine alone. I read. I listened to music. I sat on my deck and watched the stars appear between the dark silhouettes of the firs. The constant, low-level anxiety that had been my companion for years was gone. In its place was a stillness that felt vast and liberating. About a month after my call with my father, a plain white envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a cashier's check for $5,000 and a simple typed note. "This is a start. Daniel." I stared at the check, a complicated mix of emotions swirling within me. It wasn't just about the money. It was an acknowledgement. A concession. It was the first time Daniel had ever, in his entire life, made a tangible move to clean up his own mess without being forced by a court order. It wasn't a solution, but it was a gesture. I didn't cash it right away. I placed it on the unfinished desk in my workshop. It sat there for days, a silent testament to the seismic shift that had occurred. Another month passed. The autumn rains returned, washing the world clean. I was finishing the final sanding on the desk when a car I didn't recognize pulled into my driveway. It was a modest, well-used sedan. Daniel got out. He looked different. Thinner, maybe. The easy, thoughtless confidence he always wore was gone, replaced by something more sober, more uncertain. He didn't come to the door, just stood by his car, his hands shoved in his pockets. I walked out of my workshop and met him in the driveway. "The desk looks nice," he said, nodding toward my open workshop door. "Thanks," I said. We stood in silence for a moment, the only sound the soft dripping of water from the trees. "Chloe and I are going to counseling," he said, his eyes fixed on the gravel at his feet. "Family counseling. My parents might come too. Eventually." I nodded, not knowing what to say. "I got a job," he continued. "A real one. With a salary. In logistics. It's not glamorous, but it's stable." He finally looked up and met my eyes. "The therapist. She said I've been living my life like a guest of honor, expecting everyone else to handle the arrangements. She said I confused enabling with love." It was a stunningly astute observation. I wondered if he understood the depth of it. "I'm not here to ask for anything," he said quickly, as if sensing my skepticism. I wanted to say it to your face. I get it now. Why you did what you did. I was an asshole. I let you carry everything for years. And I was so used to it. I thought it was normal." He took a shaky breath. "I'm sorry, Leo. For all of it." The apology, when it finally came, was not the triumphant moment I might have once imagined. It was quiet and sad and deeply human. It didn't magically erase years of hurt, but it cleared the air. It allowed for the possibility of something new to grow in the space between us. Thank you for saying that, Daniel, I said. He nodded, a flicker of the old Daniel, the charming one reappearing in a small, self-deprecating smile. Don't expect miracles. I'm still me. But I'm trying. We're trying. He got back in his car and drove away, leaving me standing in the driveway. The check was still sitting on my desk inside. I walked back into my workshop, picked it up, and tore it into small pieces. It was never about the money. That evening, my mother sent me a text. It was a single photo, no words. It was a picture of my nephew, Daniel, and Chloe's son, asleep in a simple, store-bought bassinet. He was beautiful. I looked at the photo for a long time. There was no request, no demand, no hidden agenda. It was just a picture. An offering. A tiny, fragile bridge being extended across a chasm. I didn't know if I was ready to cross it. I didn't know if our family could ever be truly whole again. But as I looked at that peaceful, sleeping face, I felt the first, tentative flicker of something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. The foundation was gone, but perhaps, just perhaps, we were all finally learning how to build something new on more solid ground. A year can feel like a lifetime. The seasons in Oregon turned with their usual gentle grace, from the soft gray of winter rain to the vibrant, impossible green of spring. My life had found a new, quiet equilibrium. The writing desk I'd built sat in the corner of my living room, a testament to the beauty one can create when unburdened. Daniel and I exchanged sporadic, cautious texts, updates on his new job, a picture of my nephew, Michael, taking his first steps. There was a respectful distance between us. The space around needs to heal. My parents sent a Christmas card with a handwritten note from my mother. We're thinking of you, Leo. We hope you are well. It was a start. The silence I had cultivated was no longer a defense mechanism. It was simply my state of being. The constant hum of obligation had vanished from my life, and I hadn't realized until it was gone how much energy it had consumed. Then, one Tuesday in late March, it all shifted again. I was driving home from a client meeting in the city, the sky a moody canvas of bruised purple clouds. As I turned onto my long, gravel driveway, I saw an unfamiliar car parked near my house. It was an old, faded blue pickup truck, its body streaked with the rust of 1,000 rainstorms. A man was leaning against the driver's side door, watching me approach. As I got closer, my breath caught in my throat. It was my Uncle Robert, my mother's older brother. I hadn't seen him in at least 15 years. He was the family ghost, a man spoken of in hushed, dismissive tones. "Oh, Robert does his own thing," my mother would say with a sigh if his name ever came up. He was the black sheep, the one who'd moved to the far eastern edge of the state decades ago and rarely made contact. He looked older, of course. His face was a roadmap of sun and wind, but his eyes were the same, a piercing, intelligent blue. He pushed himself off the truck as I got out of my car. "Leo," he said. His voice was gravelly and used to pleasantries. "Robert," I replied, my mind racing. "What are you doing here?" He gestured vaguely with his hand. "Heard you rattled the family cage. Thought I'd come see the man who finally did it." I was speechless. How could he possibly know? "Your cousin Ben and I talk sometimes," he explained, as if reading my mind. "He keeps me filled in on the goings-on." Said you finally drew a line in the sand. He didn't ask to come inside. He just stood there by his old truck, the wind whipping his gray hair around his face. "I wanted to tell you something," he said, his gaze direct. "This thing with them, it's not you. It never was. It's a pattern. A machine." He told me a story I had never heard, a piece of family history that had been deliberately buried. When my mother and father were first married, they'd hit a rough patch. My grandfather had lost his job, and my parents were struggling. Robert, who was working a good-paying job at a lumber mill back then, had quietly floated them for nearly 2 years. He paid their rent, co-signed for their first car, and gave my grandfather money to tide him over. "I never thought twice about it," Robert said, his eyes looking at something far away. "That's what you do. For family. But then, when Robert's own luck turned and he needed a small loan to start a repair shop, the doors slammed shut. It wasn't just a no, it was a cold, impenetrable wall of silence. Suddenly, he was being irresponsible. He was being demanding. He was making things awkward. They didn't just turn me down, he said, his voice flat with the memory of an old, deep hurt. They rewrote the story. Suddenly, I was the one who had always been trouble. The money I'd given them wasn't a lifeline. It was a reckless gesture they had been foolish to accept. They erased my help from the family history so they wouldn't have to feel indebted. He reached into the cab of his truck and pulled out a worn, leather-bound journal. He flipped through the pages until he found what he was looking for, a folded, yellowed piece of paper. "I found this when I was cleaning out my mother's house after she passed," he said, handing it to me. It was tucked inside her Bible. It was never sent. It was a letter, written in my grandfather's shaky, elegant script. It was addressed to Robert, dated a year before my grandfather died. I unfolded it carefully. "My dearest son," the letter began. "I write this knowing I will likely never have the courage to send it. A man's pride is a foolish and terrible thing. I have not been a good father to you, nor a good man. We took your kindness and your strength, and when you needed a small piece of it back, we treated you like a stranger. We let you carry us, and then we resented you for the weight. It was easier to call you selfish than to admit we had been weak. I have lived with that shame every day. I hope one day you can forgive a foolish old man. I am so sorry, Robert. I have always been so proud of you." I read the letter twice, the words blurring through a sudden film of tears. Every sentence, every sentiment, it was my own story, written in another man's hand, a generation before. The same pattern, the same pain, the same quiet erasure of the one who gave the most. "He knew," I whispered, looking up at Robert. "He knew," Robert confirmed with a sad nod. "But knowing and acting are two different things. It's easier to let the machine run." He looked me straight in the eye. "What you did, Leo, you didn't just stand up for yourself. You threw a wrench in the whole damned machine. It might be the first time it's ever broken down." He took the letter back, folded it gently, and slipped it into his journal. "I just thought you should know," he said. "You're not the first. And you're not crazy." He didn't stay for long. He nodded once, a gesture of profound, unspoken understanding passing between us. Then he climbed into his old truck, turned it around, and drove back down the long driveway, disappearing into the vast, green landscape of Oregon. I stood there for a long time after he was gone, the air tasting of rain and resolution. The hurt I had carried for so long was still there, but it was different now. It was no longer just my own. It was a shared, generational sorrow. And in understanding that, I felt a strange and powerful sense of liberation. I hadn't broken my family. I had honored a truth that had been silenced for decades. I was the echo of my uncle's stand, the answer to my grandfather's unsent prayer. And in the quiet of my own life, in the sanctuary I had built with my own two hands, I had finally broken the cycle.